welcome to the Checkered Floor Garage. This is the Kawasaki Vulcan 750 Maintenance and Service Series. Today we'll be doing a coolant change. According to the service manual, the coolant type that we'll want is ethylene glycol, and we'll need 1.5 liters or roughly 1.6 quarts. The frequency at which to do a coolant change is every 2 years or 15,000 miles. What I'll be doing today for my coolant change is using this Peak Asian Vehicles. It's the green coolant. Like I said, the main thing to take note of is that you want ethylene glycol for the coolant type, and the one that I got is 50-50 pre-diluted, so I don't need to mess around with dilution with any water. You'll want to start the coolant change job with a cold engine. Step one is to put the bike on the center stand, and then you'll want to remove this radiator shroud here. There are 2 Phillips screws on this side, and then another 2 on the other side. Here is a close-up of the radiator shroud cover. Take note of the clip here that holds it in place. It may help you to get a flathead screwdriver, and from the left side of the bike, just depress in this clip here to make sure that this thing gets unclipped and you don't break anything. Here we are under the right side of the engine, and this right here is the crankcase drain bolt. Remove this first because it will relieve the internal pressure before we remove the radiator cap up top. It is a 10 mil bolt, and then what you want to do is put something underneath to catch the coolant. Nothing will come out yet, but as soon as you remove the cap up top, like I said, it'll start coming out. It helps to catch the coolant because not only are we going to recycle it, but we're also going to inspect its color for the cooling system and the engine condition. I'm going to be using this measuring cup from the kitchen. Don't tell my wife. The next thing that we'll do is remove this radiator drain bolt right here, and it's a 12 mil. As soon as you do, you'll notice that the crankcase drain bolt that you removed in the previous step is going to start relieving some coolant. So for your draining planning purposes, I had roughly 1.3 liters of coolant come out from here, and another roughly glass full come out over here. So just make sure that you've got the right size containers to contain the coolant. Next, we're gonna remove the radiator cap up top. Now let's remove the radiator cap, turn it counterclockwise to the first stop, and then after that, push down and turn the cap even further counterclockwise to remove it. All right, so counterclockwise. All right, counterclockwise to the first stop, and then push down and release even further. There we go. Next, we're gonna remove one more drain bolt down by the right side of the front cylinder. Remove this drain bolt from the front cylinder. It's a 10 mil. I don't really know how to capture it in a reservoir, so really not much comes out. Stick some paper towels in here, absorb the coolant, and we'll do the same thing on the other side of the bike for the rear cylinder. Here is the location for the rear cylinder drain bolt. It's also 10 mils. Place some paper towels, loosen the bolt, and drain out the coolant that way. This is the coolant reservoir tank, and then inside here is a 10 mil bolt. Remove that, drain the tank into our drain container, and then put the coolant reservoir tank back on, making sure that you don't kink any of the 2 hoses connected to this tank. Don't put any of the drain bolts back yet. Take the bike off the center stand first, and we're going to tip it from side to side to get any residual coolant out of the system. Visually inspect the condition of the coolant as follows. So if you see any white cotton-like sediments in the coolant, that indicates that the aluminum parts in the cooling system are corroding. If you see any brownish color to the coolant, that means that the iron parts in the cooling system are starting to rust or rusting. And then lastly, smell the coolant. It may indicate an exhaust or combustion leak into the cooling system. If the drained coolant was contaminated or very dirty, you can flush the cooling system with fresh water. Allow the water to run through the cooling system for about 5 minutes and allow the water to drain out. Remember to take the bike off the center stand if you do this and tip it side to side to drain out all the water from the cooling system. Now we're going to put back all of the drain bolts. There's one for the front cylinder, one for the rear cylinder on the other side. You got your bottom drain bolt, and then you got your radiator drain bolts down here. As you're installing the drain bolts on the cylinders, front and rear, and the bottom drain here, each bolt has an aluminum washer. So make sure that number one, it's there, and number two, it's in good condition. The radiator bolt has a black washer, kind of like a gasket. Make sure it's there and in good condition. And then lastly, as you're going through all this, check the condition of the radiator hoses. Make sure that they're tight and otherwise in good condition. Next, we're going to slowly add our coolant into the radiator to bring the level right up to the cap inlet fitting on the filler neck. Right in here, right at that level. Do it slowly, that'll help rid the system of trapped air. After that, fill up the coolant reservoir tank, right over here, to the appropriate level with coolant. Make sure that your bike is back on the center stand for the step. Next, again, take the bike off the center stand. We're going to tip it side to side to get some of the residual air out of the system. Now we have to get to the air bleeder bolts. In order to do so, we got to take off the gas tank. There are two 12mm bolts, one on either side. There's another 12mm bolt right here under the seat at the base of the fuel tank. You'll have to take off your seat in order to get to it. And then lastly, take off your fuel hose. And then there's two black hoses attached to the petcock. Take that off. I also recommend setting the petcock to off. Which way is it? There we go. That way we don't spill any fuel. One thing that I forgot to mention is you also want to remove your fuel level sensor and these two vent tubes. Here is the air bleeder bolt. Loosen it with a 10mm wrench. As you can see, I got some paper towels around and also on the ground. It's another messy step. Loosen that air bleeder bolt and add additional coolant into the radiator fill cap and observe this bleed valve. You're going to want to add coolant until the coolant flowing out of the bleed valve is free of bubbles. Tighten the bleed valve down after that, and we're done with this step. All right, so now we're gonna put the fuel tank back on and connect all the hoses, the fuel lines, the vent lines, all of that. And same thing as before, use this as an opportunity to check the condition of those lines and the cables and anything else you see under here. For example, I'm gonna take this opportunity at the end of the season to replace my fuel line. With the fuel tank back on, make sure that everything that you took off during this process is back on and snug tight. That includes the drain bolts, the radiator cap, and the coolant reservoir tank cap down over here, the fuel lines, the vent lines, the fuel level sensor, everything's got to go back. So do that double check and then start up the bike, let it idle, and come up to normal engine operating temperatures. After that, turn it off and check the coolant level in the reservoir tank down here. Add any if it needs it. Also just check overall any kind of leaks, anything that seems out of the ordinary. After that, take it for a test drive, come back and do the same thing. Check the reservoir tank and check the overall system for its condition. When that's all done, you can put back on this radiator shroud, and that covers the coolant change for the Vulcan 750. Like I said in the beginning, it's got to be done every 15,000 miles or 2 years. So if you got any questions or comments, leave them down below, and thank you very much for watching.